Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We are committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Backed by popular demand, our guest is Tracy Pleschourt. She is a certified coach and entrepreneur. She's the founder of Self Made You. She teaches individuals how to find solutions to their challenges so they can flourish in their lives and businesses. Tracy, welcome to the show again.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
Hey, look, it has been, I think, exactly a year this month since we were together last time. So I got a lot of
Hey,
stuff to talk with you about. Hey, but first, this reminder to our listeners and our viewers, follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. Look, your support matters. It helps us attract guests like Tracy Pleschourt. Look, I introduced you, Tracy, but could you give us a glimpse into your career before you founded Self Made You?
you bet. Yeah, I spent 20 years in the advertising industry. I was the director of operations for one of Minneapolis's largest agencies. We had clients like Harley Davidson, Delta Airlines, just really fun brands to work on. Subaru of North America, Porsche, all the sexy brands. And so it was a really fun industry to work within. But I always felt like I was kind of a entrepreneur who was trying to fit into an employee's body. I knew that I was being called for something more. I really love to motivate and inspire people. And I was suffering from my own stressors. I felt a lot of overwhelm, a lot of frustration with all of my, you know, business demands, with my family demands, with my health demands. And I personally felt like I was suffering at my own hand. And I really wanted to better understand how to navigate out of that. And so
Mhm.
when I made the decision to really take that leap into entrepreneurship, I knew what direction I was going to go, and it was going to be in a coaching direction, helping people learn how to eliminate that unnecessary suffering, eliminate the self sabotage that happens so often in our life, and really teaching people how to think differently so that they can rely on and trust themselves under any circumstance, in any context. So I tend to work with people in a couple different verticals. I would say the probably the most popular one is health and wellness. Second to that is probably relationships. And then I would say professional advancement. So I teach a framework from which to think from, and I'd be happy to go over that with you.
Okay, great. We will definitely unpack all of those things as we go forward. Now, but you said that you felt a calling, an urging to make a shift in your professional career. What is that like? Can you tuck us into that feeling, that sense of, there's something else that I need to do?
Yeah, I had this amazing opportunity to really connect with all of our employees. At the time when I was in the advertising industry, I was responsible for attracting and retaining people to our brand. And I actually had an opportunity to connect with some of the clients as well. So I knew that it was the connection with other people that I loved the most. It wasn't necessarily the day in and day out operations. And it's just this almost like this self-actualizing feeling where you know that you are impacting other people's lives, and it really has a profound impact on your own life. And
Mhm.
I wanted more of that. That was the
Yeah.
calling that I recognized. And I knew that it would look a lot different than the current environment that I was in. I just, like every other entrepreneur. You don't have the playbook. You just have to get out there, roll up your sleeves, and put one foot in front of the other to, see how it all unfolds. And so I was willing to, take that leap and really, like I said, put one foot in front of the other, knowing that that's what entrepreneurs have to do. There is no scripted, this is how it's going to unfold. You have to be willing. The feeling that you need to intentionally create for yourself is a feeling of being willing. And so that's what I did.
Now, look, you were in a great company, making good money, no doubt good at what you do. Did some people close to you say to you, hey, you're crazy for walking away from this?
Yes. I had a lot of people question my mental capacity. And I would say probably, the people that were closest to me, because that career was such a part of my identity. I had spent 20 years in that industry and loved it. There wasn't really anything that I had bad to say about my experience. It was just that I knew I wanted something more. And so that sometimes is really hard for people to reconcile. Like, why can't you just be happy with a six-figure career that feels rewarding? Well, personally, because I knew that there was more out there. I knew that I was meant to evolve in a bigger way. And so I had to make that decision for myself and really like my reasons behind that decision so that I could move forward without being, influenced by other people's thoughts and feelings. And I just recognized that they're entitled to those thoughts and feelings. And, they get to make their own decisions, just like I'm going to make my own decisions. So of course, people shared with me what their thoughts and feelings were, but I will say that, my immediate family, my children, my husband, they were in full support. They know that when I put my mind to something, and it's, I've done diligence in the context of really understanding what I'm walking away from and what I'm walking into, they supported me. So I'm so grateful. I'm so fortunate that I had that kind of support because, it is risky. And if I'm being honest, I'm not sure if my husband was to walk into my office right now and say, hey, honey, I'm going to walk away from my, 30 plus career and take a leap of faith. I'm not sure I could be that same supportive person that he was.
I understand. I'm not sure if I told you this the last time we talked, but the name of your consulting firm, Self-Made You, the first time I saw it without knowing anything about you, it knocked my socks off.
Yeah.
So once again, how did you come to that, Self-Made You?
Yeah, I've always thought that it's interesting when you declare yourself self-made, or when you talk about another person in the context of being self-made, the images that are conjured up have a lot to do with wealth. I would say you hear a lot of the self-made millionaires, and I think of it entirely different. I don't think of it as an ego-centered, identity. I think of it more as a purpose-driven identity or role or responsibility. I look at being self-made is somebody who's willing to take responsibility for all of their results, whether they're intentional or unintentional. And they're also willing to model that kind of, thinking and feeling and behaviors for those around them, because I think that's what is going to have an impact on, our world. There's so much finger pointing, there's so much blaming going on, and it's because there's a lack of responsibility, of ownership. And I like to teach people how to trust and rely on themselves so that they can take that responsibility, recognizing that, failures are typically the experiences that afford you the most learning, the most growth. And so you become willing to even do things like fail, and you take responsibility for it, or you take credit for it. So I have always loved that kind of concept of taking that kind of responsibility. And so I also love teaching people and coaching people. So I wanted to kind of marry that concept with an environment that I could teach and coach within. And so it made perfect sense to me to create this online school where I can teach these concepts and really come alongside people who are committed to personal growth. And teaching them how to think different is like the root of it all. Most of us have a formal educational experience where we were taught what to think. You know, we spent 12 plus years being taught what to think. And it doesn't really emphasize any sort of trust or reliance on yourself. It emphasizes, you know, putting trust and reliance on things outside of you when you're taught what to think. And so I have built this business around teaching people how to think. And so I created a formula. We use SELF as an acronym to guide you as a framework so that you can easily remember how to trust and rely on yourself. So it's 4 simple steps, and you just keep using it over and over and over. And I teach it and coach it in unlimited applications. We have programming at Self-Made You for some of life's most common curveballs. And then we also have a membership where people come every single day and just really sharpen their skills on relying on themselves and trusting themselves.
That's great. You know, I've been around your work, and to get to know you better over a year ago, I actually enrolled in one of your mini classes online. And it's not like, you know, self-made you. It's like you have a conviction that individuals can actually change and grow and overcome some of their limiting beliefs. This is my sense of it, and I'm sure you would agree. You can't disagree with that. But anyway, I want to get to something else, Tracy, that you taught me that I had never, ever considered before. And I hope you'll go with me on this one. And that is the primitive brain and the prodigy brain. In fact, let me just say this real quick, and I want you to talk to us about this. Your work seems to intersect, you know, for me, the neurosciences, positive psychology. And I said, wait a minute, primitive brain, prodigy brain. So take us into this thing about primitive brain. What is that? And we're going to go step by step to try to look at, you know, how you help people solve their problems.
Yeah. So
primitive brain.
So as a human being, we all have that 3-pound organ that exists between our ears. And again, I cannot remember a time when I was in school when I was taught about how my brain actually functioned and what was normal and what wasn't. So anytime I experienced unwanted feelings, I would deduct from that there was something wrong with me, that I shouldn't be feeling that way, which couldn't be further from the truth. And so again, part of our curriculum is really focused on teaching this neuroscience of the human brain and how it's meant to function so that you recognize how normal your thoughts and your feelings and your behaviors actually are. When you normalize some of what's been playing out, you have so much more control. So we have this 3-pound organ. If you were to cut it straight down the middle, the left side is what I like to call your primitive brain. Now, our brain is meant to keep us alive. It has a purpose of survival. And so when we were in a primitive state, it would keep us alive with a lot of dramatic thoughts. You know, it would keep us very vigilant about all of the dangers that were around us. And those dangers were real in the primitive state. But today, in our more advanced, modernized world, we're not really in that much danger. Yet, we still have this primitive brain that's offering us a lot of fear-based thoughts. And so I teach people to just have a heightened sense of awareness around those thoughts, not even to try to change them. You can kind of grow into changing your thoughts, but really what gives you the most traction, what you get the most mileage from, is just having a heightened sense of awareness around the fear-based thoughts that you're prone to having. So these thoughts might be occurring to us because of our childhood, some of the experiences we had in childhood. Some of them might be occurring to us because of the messaging that we're exposed to even as adults. So there's a lot of psychology behind why we have the thoughts we have, but I want you to fundamentally understand that half of your brain is missioned with keeping you alive. And it does that by seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and being really efficient. And when I say being really efficient, I mean thinking the same thoughts over and over and over, not having to come up with new thoughts. So the thoughts, we have 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those thoughts are coming from our primitive brain, and often they're the same thoughts we had yesterday. So if we are having thoughts that are making us feel defeated, or if they're making us feel unworthy or confused or frustrated or shameful, it would behoove us to pinpoint what those thoughts are and do the work to either question them or change them, because they're not serving us. And so a heightened sense of awareness and just like realization of why these thoughts are occurring is where we start. So half your brain is all day, every day, either acting as your best friend or your worst enemy. It's offering you a lot of fear-based, self-sabotaging thoughts. The other half, go ahead.
Before, I don't want to go there yet, but I want to ask you a few more questions about this primitive brain, because a lot of people are driven by it and aren't even aware of it. So let me ask you a couple of pointed questions on this one. Let's say there's someone who wants to do public speaking, but they just have this fear. They don't know where it's coming from. They are competent. They know that they're competent, but they have this fear, and this fear is what keeps them from embarking upon that endeavor. Is that coming from the primitive brain, Tracy?
Yeah, because your primitive brain is telling you, don't put yourself in any sort of danger where people might judge you, or you might say the wrong thing that you can't recover from, or people, might question you, or, think poorly of you, right? Those are all of the very subconscious. They might be very deeply rooted, and you can't even articulate them as well as I just did. All you know is that you're feeling intense fear.
Yeah. What I also heard you say on that is that a person who has this primitive brain operating in any given moment may assume this only happens to me.
Right.
These other folks don't have it, but you said, wait a minute, tell us, what you said, look, a lot of people are influenced by their primitive brain.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has that part of their brain. You cannot escape it. So I want to make sure that when I'm working with my clients, that this does not become an exercise in getting rid of primitive brain thoughts, because they actually keep us from walking in front of a speeding bus, right? It does keep us alive. It keeps our heart beating without having to think about it. It keeps us breathing without having to think about it. It does have purpose, but we want to be able to distinguish whether or not it's offering us helpful thoughts or unhelpful thoughts. And there are times, especially when we're not aware, that it does self-sabotage us. So that's the purpose. The exercise is to heighten your awareness around the thoughts that you're hearing, so that you are less likely to react from them and more likely to respond. You just respond simply with a question. Is that true? Is that helpful?
Yeah. I love this. You just remind me of an adage. An adage is knowledge is power. So be
Mhm.
aware of where those thoughts are coming from. I've met a lot of people who've said to me, in fact, someone said to me recently, I have a fear of heights, is what they said. You would say that's simply a thought coming from that person's primitive brain.
Right. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
exactly
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
I would commend those people who have the realization that they actually have the fear in the first place, because that's the first step. Awareness is the first step. So
Mm.
they are aware that they're afraid. Then I would help them connect the dots back to what's the thought that's creating the fear.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Okay, so now the next one, oh boy, this is juicy. The prodigy brain. Tell us about that.
Yes. So the prodigy brain I gave it that name very lovingly because it's the more extraordinary part of your brain. It is the part of your brain that you can be intentional and you can actually respond from. It's also the part of your brain that goes unused. It's the less used part of your brain because the primitive brain has been used so often that it is stronger. It is the part that runs off of default, where we have to intentionally engage the prodigy brain. So this is technically called your prefrontal cortex, and it is the part that can almost like watch the thinking that's going on in your primitive brain. So it's also the part of your brain that can detect the feelings. It has a heightened sense of awareness. So when you are being intentional, you are operating from your prodigy brain. But see how being intentional is an engagement that you are, leaning into. It's not happening by default. You actually have to activate that. So that's when you're operating from your prodigy brain. And the prodigy brain, you can gain access to strengths like empathy, discovery, curiosity, innovation. From your prodigy brain, you can start to navigate from your values. You can reason. It's not a default knee-jerk reaction. It's more of a slow, methodical process response. So it's a very different like cause and effect depending on which part of your brain you're operating from.
Mhm.
Another way to tell which part of your brain you're operating from is by how you're feeling. If
Yeah.
you're feeling something unwanted, guilt, shame, frustration, overwhelm, fear, um, hate, any sort of iteration of pain, it's coming from your primitive brain. If you're feeling love, compassion, curiosity, um, even sometimes just a neutral or even satisfied, that's coming from your prodigy brain. So
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be difficult to understand which part of your brain you're operating from. What becomes more difficult is keeping yourself aware, remembering to ask yourself the questions. How am I feeling right now?
Mhm.
Why am I
Yeah.
feeling that way? And then intentionally making the shift. So I always have in my mind, I always have a vision of like a bridge that's connecting the primitive to the prodigy brain. And I'm always thinking about like, how do I cross that bridge? How do I bridge the gap between
Mhm.
the two based on how it is that I'm feeling?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a great guidance on there. If you're wondering if you operate from your primitive, how do you feel? If you feel blah, sad, whatever, that's primitive. Prodigy, I'm happy with life. That's prodigy. That
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So let me go on now because you talk to people all over the world. I mean, the internet. There's one global family here. I know you're online and I know you do things all the time. We'll get more specific in a moment on that. But you talk to a lot of people, and I don't think I'm guessing here. Everyday people. That is the person who may be, a garbage garbage collector, and then the super professional, the executive. So, what kinds of things do these people, Tracy, bring to you? Everyday people to the professional. What kinds of things are you seeing out there?
Yeah. It's a lot of people, I would say, even though the socioeconomics, some of the demographics, some, genders, they vary. I will tell you very honestly that what they experience is not very different from one another. They all are suffering unintentionally, and unnecessarily. Like they all have been believing that they should be happy all of the time. And if they're not happy all of the time, something is going wrong. And that's not true. And so I have to, as their coach, I have to do the work to help them understand, have them have a bigger perspective around how your brain actually functions. And emotions are caused by thoughts. And if we have 60,000 thoughts a day, we're probably having 60,000 different feelings a day. And some of those, life is 50-50. Some of those feelings are happy feelings, and some of those feelings are unhappy or unwanted feelings.
Yeah. And this is so important. And that's just the way the human organism functions, right? There's nothing wrong with you. It's just this way. So so let me get this one right. Make sure that I pull out the right question here. What if someone is feeling like they are an imposter in their profession? Is that unique to certain groups of individuals, or do many people have that same thought? I am an imposter and I don't want to be found out. What would you say about that?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that, because the framework that we teach people to utilize, to think from, really starts to create more trust, more self-reliance. Excuse me. The framework that we use is SELF. So you start with a decision, you eliminate the self-sabotage, leverage your prodigy brain strengths, and then you finish with a decision. So starting with a decision is as simple as, what is it that you want? I want to lose weight. I want to be promoted at my job. I want to heal a relationship. Now, the second step, eliminating the self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is imposter syndrome. Self-sabotage is judging yourself harshly. Self-sabotage is people-pleasing. Self-sabotage is procrastinating. Self-sabotage is perfectionism. So many people suffer unnecessarily from these saboteur narratives that they are prone to hearing. So there's 10 of them that are very universal. The judge is probably the most universal, that sounds like, I'll be happy when I get the promotion, or I should have never said that to him, or they should have shown up when they said they would have. That's how you judge circumstances, you judge other people, and you judge yourself very harshly. Those kinds of thoughts create guilt, regret, shame, disappointment. Those kind of feelings result in self-sabotage. You can call it imposter syndrome, that has an effect, but it is these narratives, these saboteur narratives that you're suffering from, that you're listening to, that you're reacting from, that is creating the imposter syndrome type feeling. So we offer a free assessment. It's called the saboteur assessment because, like I said, there's 10 very universal saboteur narratives that are birthed actually from your biggest strength, your most inherent strengths. So, for example, my saboteur narrative that I most often hear is the hyperachiever, where I can't be satisfied with good enough. I often succumb to this belief that if I don't succeed, I'm a failure. Or everything I do has to be the best. And I start to attach my worthiness to my results, which if you don't always hit the A+, then you're left feeling empty and depressed and vulnerable and unworthy. And so you have to be aware that you are prone to hearing those kind of thoughts. And the reason why you're prone to hearing those kind of thoughts is because your most, like, your biggest strength is actually being overused and abused. So I am a driven, pragmatic, goal-oriented person. Those are the type of people that often hear those hyperachiever narratives. And so becoming aware of that, taking an assessment that takes about 5 minutes to become more aware of which narratives you're most prone to hearing is like shining a spotlight on that, like, minefield. You want to know what to be looking out for so you can really watch your step. I don't want to react to these, BS dramatic thoughts that I'm most often, that I'm most used to hearing. I want to know that about myself so I can, like, become more aware and watch out for those thoughts and be less likely to react from them, because I know that they're there. I know they're just a part of my primitive brain. Does that make sense?
That makes sense indeed. And I do want a link to your assessment for my show
Yeah.
notes. Would you please? Okay, great. All right.
Sure.
So, what if someone, so I can find a question here about what people deal with. Let's say that someone made a stupid comment to a supervisor 50 years ago, and they still look back and say, you know something, that was pretty stupid. How would you coach them around with that?
Yeah. So, I would ask them, is that thought what you now are believing, that was a really stupid mistake? Is that a helpful thought? Like, I would ask you to consider, I would want you to open up your mind, because when you are bought and sold, when you are in that black and white thinking, it's very difficult to discover any other factors that might be involved, because you've got your blinders on and you're so, like, banking on being right about the fact that was a really stupid mistake. What actually might have come from that is a gift and an opportunity? Like, I would ask you those kind of questions so that you could open up your mind to a different perspective. That perspective that you open up to is going to change your experience. And that's all I care about. I want your experience of self-loathing for the last 30 years around this quote unquote mistake. I want you to feel differently about that. And I know for sure that if you started to question your thinking and find a new perspective or shift it ever so slightly, I know ever so slightly you will be feeling different. And that's what's important.
Oh, that's great, because what you're suggesting to me, at least as I hear it, is that a better feeling is in you. You just have to find it. And one way to find
Exactly.
it is to dust off all of those other things. So self-sabotaging, is that the same as a person having limited beliefs? Do you see them in
Yes.
the same way?
Yep, I
Okay.
do. Yep, I
Okay.
do.
All right. So now I know that there's a lot of, in addition to a lot of abundance and prosperity and happiness in the world, there's a great deal of pain and suffering in the world. And I think one of your teachings is that people sometimes float between being overwhelmed and confused. Can you tell us about that and how that could lead to pain and suffering, and how you coach people around that?
Yeah, I think that overwhelm and confusion can feel familiar and therefore comfortable. Anything that is familiar that you've experienced in the past, there is some comfort in that because it's not new. You kind of know what to expect. You can even expect the uncomfortable feelings and the uncomfortable results that are going to come from confusion and overwhelm. And so some people just settle into it. And we want to really heighten the awareness around how much control you actually have and how feeling any emotion is a choice. You don't have to ever continue to feel overwhelmed or confused or frustrated. It's like having your hand on a hot stove. You feel the pain of the hand on the hot stove and you remove it. So I would like to challenge people to let the feeling of overwhelm and frustration and confusion just be kind of the alert, the hand on the hot stove that says, remove your hand before it does permanent damage, before the heat does permanent damage. So the feeling serves as an indicator that now you have a choice. You can continue to feel this way, or you can question the thinking that's causing the feeling.
Boy, I like that a lot, because you're saying, look, if you feel badly, there's something behind that. That's not your natural state. I love
Amen.
that.
It's an indicator light. Think about it just like an indicator light in your car. The indicator light goes on that says you might need some, might need an oil change. You need some maintenance, right? It's an indicator that you might want to look into something. You might want to do a little bit of investigating.
That's great. And, I saw something on your webpage, you all over social media, where you actually tell us, and I'm included in this, you said, look, you are the solution. Did I get that right? That you're guiding us to recognize that we are the solution. So what are some of the things that we can do to help make our lives richer, if that's what we want to do?
Yes. So if you're anything like me, you've lived the majority of your life kind of counting the problems that you have. And you clearly and quite quickly come to the conclusion that, and I'm the common denominator. I'm the one thing that stays the same in all of these problems. So I want people to consider, maybe you aren't the common denominator to all of your problems. Maybe you are the solution to your problems. Maybe you can actually tap into yourself instead of looking outside of yourself for all of the solutions. Instead, start relying and trusting on yourself. So you simply think of yourself, SELF, as the guidance, as the framework of certain questions. This is how you would coach yourself. So you start with a decision. What is it that I want? So if we are talking about your work, whatever field you're in, if you are getting up day in and day out and it just feels like Groundhog's Day and you're not feeling very fulfilled, you start with a decision. What is it that I want today? What is it that I want in the next 10 minutes? What is it that I want from my boss? What is it that I want from my income? Ask yourself these questions, and don't just ask yourself the question, make sure you answer the question. It's really, really important. So you start with a decision. What is it that I want? Why do I want it? Then you eliminate the self-sabotage. You ask yourself honestly, what is it that I am feeling right now? I'm feeling defeated. I'm feeling inadequate. I'm feeling unseen. I'm feeling unworthy. Okay. Why am I feeling that way? What is it that I'm believing? Shining a light on that is really going to spotlight and reduce the risk of the self-sabotage. So you've started with a decision, you've eliminated the risk of self-sabotage. Now you can get intentional about kind of poking the holes into those limiting beliefs, those saboteur narratives. Now, I said intentional, which means you're now operating from that prodigy brain. So you can access empathy. You can access discovery and innovation. So What's the kindest, most compassionate thing you can tell yourself right now?
Mhm.
You're at work, you're feeling unseen. What's the most compassionate and kind thing you can tell yourself right now? Like asking yourself and answering those questions
Mhm.
really makes some progress. And then finally, you finish with a decision. What is the next step that I can take that's so easy, it's hard not to do? That's a great question that, again, eliminates self sabotage, because
Mhm.
the primitive brain will say, it's got to be hard, right? And so it's going to create some monumental, experience or playbook that must be taken in order to get a different result. And
Mhm.
I'm saying, time out. It's what's the next step? One simple step that you can take that's so easy, it's hard not to do. That's how you eliminate the self sabotage. Come up with, maybe it's a conversation with your boss, maybe it's a list of the value that you bring to the work environment.
Mhm.
Something very simple that incrementally, when compounded, really starts to make some progress towards what it is that you want. And
Yeah.
so that's the SELF system. And we have um, a day planner that's on Amazon that anybody can buy. It's called Self-Made Day. And it's literally your workbook for life. It takes you through 3 months worth of days, and it has you starting with a decision. What is it that you want from today? Eliminating the
Mm.
self-sabotage. What are the thoughts that you're thinking? Leveraging your prodigy
Yeah.
brain strengths, and then finishing with the decision, all while working through your day. So of course, it's just like every other day planner where you put your commitments down by the hour, but I'm also having you make decisions ahead of time about how you want to feel about those commitments and what would you
Right.
have to be believing in order to feel that way. So
Right.
this day planner is a game changer, and I don't
Mm.
care under what application you need it, it works really, really well. And when you buy the day planner, you get a free course on exactly how to maximize it. So
Uh-huh.
it's one of our gifts to the world because we know that it changes lives. And
That's
it's a
great.
pattern, a habit of thinking that you can get yourself into, that eventually you don't need a day planner to practice. You'll just
Yeah.
be out on a walk, you'll be in a conversation, and you'll recognize how much more you're relying on yourself, how much more confidence you have in yourself.
Right. That's awesome. Now, just parenthetically, before I lose it, did I just see balloons float up? Was it?
Yes, I
Was
have no idea why my Zoom is like, it's got to be some sort of AI function. But when I do this,
uh,
usually like you get the thumbs and you get the
yeah.
celebration and the confetti. It's just
Well,
crazy.
it was so appropriate. I thought you had it planned at that spot. We're at a point of celebration. But as you train on this, I saw you either blogged about it or talked about it in one of your shorts on the internet. And it's like love yourself and love your life. And what I gained from that when I first saw that is that oftentimes I can look out there for validation. But then
Right.
you're saying, love yourself, love your life. This is the part of the solution. Is that about right?
That's exactly right. If
Mm.
you have made the decision that you are going to love yourself no matter what, it doesn't matter what other people think, because you're convicted in what it is that you want to believe. And when you start to feel grounded in your convictions, you like your reasons behind making the decisions that you're making, everyone else's opinion is, you can listen to it, you can take it under consideration, but none of them matter as much as your opinion. And so
Yeah.
this is what happens as you start to build the capacity in thinking different, in relying on yourself. You start to really like exude and model this kind of behavior, which is contagion. It's so contagious. And so when you're operating from your prodigy brain or your primitive brain, they're both contagions. And so you'll notice that the people that you're interacting with will start to meet you where you're at. So if you're somebody who is riddled with fear and you have a lot of knee-jerk reactions, you'll notice that the people that you're interacting with are playing off of that. It's contagious. And it's a contagion. And so same is true with your prodigy brain. So I think that that's worth remembering. It's just another reason why operating from our prodigy brain makes a lot of sense.
It sure does. It sure does. So will this booklet, let's say that someone does have this virus of looking outside for validation, looking outside for love, will this booklet help someone become more comfortable in loving themselves and loving their lives?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Because it's not just a day planner in the respect of, organizing your commitments. We also have included all of the saboteur narratives in the front so that you can easily identify what those narratives are sounding like. And so you can also look at the strengths that you want to leverage, and we give you the specific questions to ask yourself. So if you are somebody who is really struggling with having compassion and empathy for yourself, love for yourself, we give you the questions to ask that generates that emotion.
Yeah, boy, this just is consistent with your consulting, your school, self-made you, is that, look, you can be a part of this solution yourself as opposed to farming it out to somebody else. Yeah. So, I saw somewhere, and I don't recall exactly where, but you were advocating that a person can actually plan I think you used the word, Tracy, a perfect day. Did I get that right, or am I exaggerating here?
No, that's exactly what I said. Yeah.
So how can we do that? How can we plan a perfect day?
So it's all about making decisions ahead of time. Bottom line, you learn how to make decisions ahead of time. So when you are using this day planner and you get to, today, and you're actually deciding, what your commitments are this is actually by the half an hour. So I'm going to just turn to today because I want you to know how I plan my perfect day. So at 9 o'clock, I did a group coaching call, and I not only wrote down group coaching at 9 o'clock, I made a decision ahead of time. So I did this at about 7 a.m. this morning. I made a decision ahead of time about how I wanted to feel when I showed up at 9 o'clock for the group coaching call. I want to feel excited. And it doesn't stop there. The next column asks you, what would I have to be believing in order to feel excited? And I wrote down, I know how to help people change their perspectives.
Wow.
That makes me so excited. Under any circumstance, I get so excited because I feel like I have the cure to cancer. I really know how to eliminate people's unnecessary suffering. And so I remind myself of that. So I'm making decisions ahead of time, not only about where I have to be and when. I make a decision about how I'm going to feel and what I'm going to be thinking. And when you're not in the moment, you have the space, you have the capacity to make those kind of decisions ahead of time. And before you know it, you've got one day, one perfect day on top of another perfect day, on top of another perfect day. Before you know it, you're living the perfect life that you have architected, you have orchestrated.
You are the architect of your life. I love it. We'll have all of this information in the show notes for people to grab. There's something else that I saw in connection with you. You had written, it was just a short phrase I saw. It was you written in caps, and you and yourself written in lowercase. And that made me think, what message is she conveying there? What message, Tracy, are you conveying?
Yeah, I think people sometimes get a little confused about who they are. What
Mm,
is the definition of you and what is the definition of self? And I want people to make a decision about how they want to think about themselves, how they want to think about the way that they are portrayed, the way they show up in the world. And so
mm,
there is kind of this physical manifestation, like a physical energy that is you.
mm,
And then there is the non-physical energy and the ability to think about yourself in a past, present, and future context.
mm,
And so the you is kind of the here and now, right? It's how you are physically, the energy of you right now, physically, how that manifests. But yourself is a perspective. It's the past perspective of yourself, the present perspective of yourself, and the future. And guess who gets to write that script? Guess who
mm,
gets to decide what that perspective looks like? You do.
mm.
And so I want you to recognize the amount of control that you have. And sometimes it starts with defining it. And so
Mhm.
I am always about definitions or being able to define things through opposing terms. And so I
Mhm.
like to talk about the difference between you, the physical manifestation, and
Mhm.
yourself as the perspectives of past, present, and future, so that people recognize that you are so much more than what you think. You're so much more than the image that is reflected to you in the mirror. And I want people to have that perspective. So that's why I talk about the difference.
I just love it. You're just blowing me away. No wonder I wanted you back. Look here, but at first, earlier I said that your work intersects neuroscience, positive psychology, but look, I'm feeling that there's something else that I want to say, and that is spirituality. That there's something deeply spiritual about what you're doing. Does that resonate with you, or am I just flying by the seat of my pants here?
No, it absolutely does. I think when you are operating from your prodigy brain, you are exuding love. You are
Mm,
exuding acceptance. You're exuding abundance. You can tap into your source, whatever your source is, whether that's
yeah.
nature, that's God, that's universe. You have the ability to connect with your source when you're operating from your prodigy brain.
Mm,
So it does become very
mm,
spiritual. And
mm,
I think of it as mind, body, spirit. And I'm very aware of the intersects. And I'm intentional about how I connect to my mind, body, and spirit all
mm.
day, every day. I get tired just like the next guy. So,
Oh,
you can't be on at all times. I have a lot of empathy for all of my humanness too, and how
yeah,
I
yeah,
forget to remember that I'm human sometimes.
yeah,
So, but
yeah,
yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because it is very
yeah.
meaningful to me too,
Uh,
that when you're operating from your prodigy brain, you have the ability to connect on a very
yeah.
spiritual level.
Oh, God, I'm feeling it. I really am, literally. Okay, so now you've already talked about the value of making a decision, and I don't want people to miss this. This is so important. And I saw this though in connection to what you said somewhere. You're all over the place, as I've said before. Is that the value when you make a decision? It's an antidote to something like frustration. If you're
Mhm.
frustrated, it means that you're somehow. So could you talk to us about that? If I got that right about,
Yeah.
there are antidotes to things like frustration.
Yeah. So it again, it just goes back to the self framework, or learning how to self coach. SELF. So if you have an awareness that you're feeling afraid or you're feeling any sort of pain, the antidote is to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
We stay in pain because we are just in this perpetual spin. Like we're believing whatever that limiting thought is that's creating the pain. We're so fixated, we've got our blinders on, that we are not considering any other factors. And the simplest way to get out of pain, to get out of suffering, to get out of confusion is by making a decision. Any decision, because what is painful is when you feel out of control, when you feel that you don't have control, when things are happening to you, that is painful. You make a decision. It can be as small as, I am going to set my alarm for the hour, every hour on the hour, just so I can become more aware of how I'm feeling. I can just ask myself, what am I feeling right now? That's a decision. It doesn't even have to be a decision about the circumstance that you're in. Any decision creates a sense of control, which is the antidote to fear. It stops the fear in its tracks.
Tracy, you are in good company. I read a neuropsychiatrist, one of the early pioneers of the neurosciences, wrote before 1960. He said, a firm decision steadies us. And that's what you just said. Now, I know a lot of your work deals with women just by default. You work with men too. You work with everybody. But you also, you do some work with women in business. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have a heart for entrepreneurs, and I have a special place in my heart for purpose-driven businesses. And so I have always wanted to come alongside people and help them, gain clarity, gain a sense of direction. And often the people that I'm coaching, or the entrepreneurs that I work with, they too feel called to coach or to teach in some capacity. So I find myself working with a lot of professionals or entrepreneurs. And most recently, I have found people who are more interested in starting a new career under the Self-Made You umbrella. So we launched a certification program back in 2023 where you can learn how to use our framework, how to teach and coach people to really impact lives at an exponential level, and really find that feeling of becoming self-actualized. And so I talked about what it meant to be self-made, and I thought, I've got to put my money where my mouth is and create a platform from which people can actually do that. And so that's been our latest endeavor. And so after 2023 ended, we graduated 10 new coaches, and they are now coaching for us and in all capacities, which is just amazing. So
that's great. Yeah. I know you've written a lot of things, and you may not remember the specific article, but it caused me to stop. I saw it somewhere, so on some platform. It caused me to stop and to read it, and because the title was so provocative. And if you recall the article, I would like for you just to give us some nuggets from it. And the title, as I recall, is "The Power of Education." Do you recall writing anything about that? If not, it's okay. But do you recall writing anything about that?
Yeah, I do. And I just last week, I was the keynote speaker at a local high school, where I was speaking to STEM students. So students who are more focused on science, technology, engineering, and math. And they are, for all practical purposes, they are the students that are problem solving. And I really wanted to bring an alternative way of thinking about science, technology, engineering, and math, and really kind of put the you into STEM because I think that that's what's missing. Again, our education, is focused on all of the things outside of us, and the emphasis on what we can do, how much control we have, and the ability to exponentially increase confidence is there, but it doesn't get taught. And so I really wanted to kind of put a call out there to teachers, to parents, to really recognize the importance of, teaching young people how to tap into themselves as
Oh,
the solution. And so, yeah, I don't want to, demonize the formal educational system. I just think that there's a gap there that I have an opportunity to fill.
yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, I think that's beautiful because what you're talking about is possible for a person to feel empowered, and this is what you're offering. But before you go, you got to talk to us about free coaching Fridays, if you still have it. Free
Yeah, yeah,
coaching
yeah.
Fridays. This is a wonderful invitation. I want everyone to go to it. Tell us about free coaching Fridays.
Yes, every single Friday at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, you can get onto a Zoom call with people around the world who are wanting to either sit back and watch other people being coached utilizing the self framework, or you can bring your own circumstance, your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own experiences, results that maybe you're unhappy with, and get coached. And so you can, we believe that whether you're the one in the hot seat, quote unquote hot seat, or you're just, watching from afar, there is so much value to be had. So we invite anyone and everyone. And so I'll make sure I give you that link as well.
Okay, great. But look here, you have given us a great deal of value today. And look, we started this is second time together. So I'm thinking 2025. You're gonna
Yeah.
come back, if not before. You may anyway. But I am so excited. I feel empowered, and I just hope that everyone watching or listening to this also feel empowered. Tracy Pleschourt, thank you so much for spending time with me.
Stephen, thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, you've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Tracy Pleschourt, the founder of Self Made You. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day.
You are not alone, just keep on.